Okay, here we go. I believe I have everything I need for this particular episode of Law Enforcement and Me. Welcome in. My name is Miss Carmen. I am the host of your favorite novice community policing podcast called Law Enforcement and Me, otherwise known as LE and Me. Today is Thursday, October 23rd. Schedules are schedules, life is life. Since this is not my bread and butter, unfortunately, this episode had to come late, but I'm going to do what I do as best as I can do. Um, this episode is always, of course, going to be brought to you by not only myself, because I'm doing this financially all by myself, but also with the help of the person that gives me the inspiration to do these episodes, one of my best friends in the world. That's my boy, Tim. Tim Santoro out there in Las Vegas, Nevada, with his own brand of law enforcement. He is a law enforcement advocate and former trained law enforcement officer with his organization called Tactical Security Solutions. Tactical Security Solutions is something that Tim is very passionate about. He does things such as teaching situational awareness. And situational awareness is one of those things that, for those of us like myself, just as we go to the supermarket, just as we go to work, just as we function in our everyday lives, we have to be aware of our surroundings. And Tim does an excellent job on teaching that. He teaches it for not only just the citizens of the world, but he teaches it in terms of corporate America. He teaches it to other security agencies. So please not only just hear that I'm advertising for him here on Law Enforcement and Me, but please reach out to him. Look for his information online. Look for his teachings on YouTube. You will not be disappointed. Commercial. Tim, I just did a commercial. Okay. So let's do this. I am excited because I am doing the On Patrol Live recap from this past weekend. We're looking at the episodes from October 17th and 18th. These are the episodes that my On Patrol Live media mogul, someone that I admire very much because he reminds me so much of my dad, and that is Mr. Dan Abrams. Dan was on site in Daytona. Last week they had something called Biketoberfest, which is an annual event, and you have bike enthusiasts from all across the country, possibly around the world, that all fluctuate into Daytona. Dan Abrams said, you know what? I've always been talking about how I'm going to Daytona and I'm going to put on my chaps and get down there and be a part of Biketoberfest. Well, he made good on his promise. And not only was he down there for Biketoberfest, but he actually did a couple of ride-alongs. Friday night, he did his ride-along with, you guys know I love the Marr brothers, all three of them. But this past weekend, Dan was riding along Friday night with Lieutenant Richie Marr, and on Saturday night, I believe it was Sergeant James Marr. And I've said it before, if they ever decided they want to revive Blue Bloods, they need to do it in Daytona with the Marr brothers, because those guys are amazing, dynamic. They know their stuff. They explain things to the camera well. I mean, I honestly would love to know more about their family dynamic and how it is a part of law enforcement. I believe their father was a Daytona Beach police officer as well. I should have looked that up before I came on here to record, but um, we can look into that later on. Maybe one day after some finagling, after I host, co-host, panel guest on Patrol Live. You see how I threw out those hints? Yeah, maybe one day that will happen. But let's talk about this past weekend's episodes. Now, the first thing I want to talk about on Friday night, Dan Abrams talked about the tactical vest that he had on and how heavy it was. Now, me being an Air Force veteran, and I have not been in any sort of training environment for a few decades, I was trying to finagle to see what it was that he was putting on. And I believe when he was in first shift, he talked about the different weights in terms of pounds of the tactical vest that he had to wear in order to be a part of the ride along. And he chose to have the one that's going to protect him the most, which also had happened to be the heaviest one, which is 10 pounds. Now, mind you, as a police officer that's going out there and they have their tactical vest, I'm quite sure that they're carrying that extra 10 pounds of weight on them every night as well. If I decided that I wanted to carry an extra 10 pounds of weight, I probably could not move. That's just me being as old as I am and not having been trained recently, having been recently trained, I'm saying like within the past decade with tactical training. So to see that, that actually told me, okay, Dan is serious about this. He's serious about doing the ride along. Now, I'm not going to lie, Friday night's episode was a little slow. And I'm honestly thinking that it was slow because even though the advertisement was for 9 different departments throughout the country, we only saw Dan Abrams and maybe 2 or 3 other departments on the show. And I think that was because the focal point of this weekend's episodes was to focus on the fact that Dan Abrams was doing the ride along. When we shoot back to New York, and you got Sean Sticks Larkin actually hosting the show, you got Captain Rizzo, and you got Deputy Curtis. They're in there. They're being the panel while Dan is out there in the field. That was definitely a different dynamic because all 3 of those guys on the panel in New York, they're former law enforcement. They've been where Dan Abrams was. Dan Abrams is asking question after question, trying to understand what's going on. And he's not the law enforcement aficionado or the law enforcement trained officer, I should say, the way that Sticks, Curtis, and Rizzo are. So he's trying to get out there to understand it. I myself, had it been me, I'm not getting out the vehicle. Y'all go over there and investigate. Oh, what's that, a gun? I ain't getting out the vehicle. I got on my tactical gear. I'm in the car. I'm not trained for that. So no, I'm staying in the car. But I get what Dan was trying to do. Dan was doing his job, making it his business to fully understand what it was that they were going through. So I do believe, though, that on Friday's episode, Lieutenant Richie Marr did kind of get a little annoyed because he was trying to listen to Dan Abrams at one point, also trying to listen to the radio, also trying to pay attention to what's going on. And this particular investigation, I know they had to create a perimeter. I was trying to understand what the perimeters entailed. For me, just watching, okay, I know I have a cop on this corner and a cop on that corner. Is it north, south, east, west? Is it southwest, southeast? If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., everything runs on southeast, southwest, northeast. Nothing runs north, south, east, or west. There's not a true grid in D.C. So since I don't know the layout of Daytona, I'm trying to understand, okay, what are you? Is this a south side? Is it the east side? When the perimeter, what are you talking about? Are you talking about a circumference, north, south, east, west? What are we talking about? So, of course, as Dan Abrams is asking these questions, you could kind of see the annoyance coming from Lieutenant Marr. However, I know Lieutenant Marr, because he is a veteran when it comes to On Patrol Live, I know that he was trying to be as proactive as he possibly could be, along with trying to investigate the crime and trying to see if they can catch these suspects. It was good to see some of the old school Daytona Beach officers. I'm trying to think of the young lady's name, and I can't right now. I know she was a favorite. Puentes, 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 yes. She was there looking out for Dan Abrams. And it was just so many familiar faces. But what I really enjoyed, and I think it was on Saturday's show, was that the actual chief of the Daytona Beach Police Department was out there doing traffic control. I don't know if it was because of Biketoberfest in conjunction with On Patrol Live doing their live broadcast from Daytona Beach, but to be able to have the chief of police out there patrolling, pulling over vehicles, looking at expired license plates, looking at dark tint. I mean, just actually out there. I don't know. And I know of a couple of, police commissioners, former police commissioners from my own personal contact list. I don't think that the people that I know would be able to get into a patrol car and actually go back to pulling people over. So hats off to the chief of police in Daytona. I was quite impressed when I saw that. Um, I do know that every time that the camera went back to the panel in New York, you could see Rizzo champing at the bit because he wished he was able to suit up and be out there in Daytona. So I don't know, Rizzo, maybe next year, 2026, you'll be the one out there on the On Patrol Live ride along in Daytona. I can see it now. You're not going to talk to the camera because you're going to be out there in full force, running, chasing, giving the trajectory of what's going on, giving your commands. I mean, I totally can see it because I could see it in your face as every time Sticks would ask you a question. Oh yeah, Dan knows what we're going through now, so now he's understanding that we have to be cognizant of not just what's in front of us, but what's going on with the radio, what's going on behind us, what's going on in the perimeter. It was exciting to see. Um, I believe that on the Friday night episode, once the broadcast finished, cameras were still rolling, and there was a water rescue. Um, and I think that water rescue was something that was different because not only was a police officer that actually captured the suspect able to jump into a swamp, and I ain't jumping into no swamps down in Florida, but I think he jumped into the swamp down there and was able to capture the suspect. I don't even remember at this point, with today being Thursday, what it was that he was jumping in the water for, what the actual crime was. But I think when Dan interviewed him, when things calmed down and the police officer had flippers in his patrol car, part of me is like, is this standard uniform for a Daytona Beach Police Department? Shouldn't that be for the beach patrol? Um, my brain is so fickle and it runs so many different places, but God bless those guys. For me, the education was so great for just putting myself in the shoes of Dan Abrams and saying, you know what, here I am. And Tim and I talk about this all the time. We are the Monday morning quarterbacks where we're watching what's going on television. So for us, all we have is the vantage point of whomever is holding the camera. We don't have the advantage of the radio. We don't have the advantage of the other people, our partners. We don't have the advantage of knowing the street names. And, if we take this right, we might be able to cut them off. If we go around this circle, we might be able to head them off over here. Oh, I'm familiar with that suspect. I know his cousin. Like, we don't have that. So it was super exciting for me, especially because I host this platform, to be able to see Dan Abrams suit up and become the ride-along, the person to ride along, the person that's getting to see one-on-one what is going on. I know one of the funniest moments of the night, I don't remember which department it was. The young woman was walking down the street cutting her wig, and when the police officer came upon her, his question was, "What are you doing with all this tumbleweed?" Now, as someone who regularly wears hair that does not grow from her scalp, I understand the need for shaping wigs and weaves and things like. I understand that. But the tumbleweed comment, sir, me and you gonna have to have a conversation about that. She shouldn't have did it out in the street. I know, but the tumbleweed comment, sir, you ain't had to say that. You ain't had to call her out like that. But I digress. Anyway, so I think I'm gonna go on over to the next episode, which was Saturday, which I've talked about a little bit, which was James Marr. Now, here's what was funny about Saturday's episode. We still had the concentration on Dan Abrams in Daytona, but it was funny to me because, okay, Dan Abrams is out there, so when they pull over, he's gonna look around and it's gonna be safe for him to get out the car, even though he's got on his tactical gear. Dan Abrams is not running to catch a suspect. What he's doing is observing. But everybody knows who Dan Abrams is. So we have the woman in the wheelchair with, I believe she may have had one leg that was missing. She got a official autographed duck from Dan Abrams. If you know about the ducks and Jeep Fest and all of the stuff in Daytona, the rubber ducks is a big thing down there. You had another person that as she was riding past the pullover, and I think this was also a pullover where the chief of police was. She holds up a sign of talking about how much she loves OPL. Lady, I know you're excited to see Dan Abrams, but go back to Main Street. Go back to Main Street because he's going to be there at Main Street walking for Biketoberfest. He'll be there. Go back to Main Street. Instead, she's hindering the investigation of whatever it was that was going on over to the left. That kind of annoyed me, but again, this is just me, and it probably annoyed Tim as well. This is just, me and him texting back and forth, talking about how Dan Abrams was out there in the field. This is still an investigation. Even though this is a broadcast being broadcast throughout the country on Reelz Channel, this is still an investigation. That's the first priority. And then the last one was the woman that got pulled over. She actually technically really got pulled over for a traffic violation, but she's got all of these gifts for the cast and crew of On Patrol Live. And before they broke from her, she's like, "Where's Dan?" He's on patrol. Go back to Main Street. Go back to Main Street. I cannot for the life of me understand why they decided that this was a good thing. Go back to Main Street. I definitely want to conclude on, On Patrol Live, which started with Dan Abrams having to shop this show because Live PD had to go away after the death of George Floyd and the political fallout that came behind that. As someone who has been in media some kind of way, and I'm talking about I have been in some sort of show business, some sort of media, thanks to my dad. My dad was an old school radio disc jockey here in Baltimore on an old AM station, actually 2 AM stations back in the mid 60s. My dad was instrumental in helping bring Motown to Maryland and the whole Motortown Review. And then I came along and, I'm daddy's little girl. And some of my very first memories of me wanting to get into this type of business is in the recording studio at the radio station, watching my dad make commercials for the radio station. So from a media standpoint, coming full circle from that little kid at the radio station with my dad to being able to come on this platform and have someone that I admire so much in Dan Abrams do something this admirable, going out into the field and letting his viewers know what it feels like to actually be on patrol honestly, that's one of the most impactful things for me, especially because I am still a novice in this business, trying to get my foot grounded, trying to get people to take me seriously, and also getting people to understand why this platform means so much to me. So this is kind of a full circle moment for me. My dad is long gone. My dad left the world in 2008. But I honestly think a lot of times when I get behind this microphone, number one, getting behind this microphone feels like home. It feels like home because it just reiterates this is what I'm meant to do. The other side of me is that I'm so interested in the dynamic between the community in which I live, which is Baltimore, the relationship that the community has with law enforcement, because I come from a family that on one side of the family, I have so many family members that are former military, much like myself. I'm a military veteran. I've talked about it before. And then the other side of my family comes from what most of America sees when they think of Baltimore. I'm trying to get that side of the family to understand why a platform like this is so important. Let's talk to each other instead of talking at each other. Let's listen and try to understand why this happens, what the repercussions of that are, and stop always thinking that there's always a the word I'm looking for, the quota. Oh my goodness, I've heard that so much. Well, you only pulled me over because you gotta have that quota. Anyway, I honestly think that's just such bullshit. Um, I'm starting to get like Don Lemon now. That is just such bullshit. Um, so for the one side of my family that is encouraging me to keep moving forward with this platform, I cannot thank you enough. My Father in heaven is looking down on me and saying, that's my kid trying to make a difference. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful to Tim for always letting me shout him out, for always listening to me go off on these tangents, for me disturbing his peace because I'm always texting him, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Well, can we put that into another episode? Can you reach out to this person, see if they want to come on my podcast? Tim, I mean, honestly, thank you. But this episode recap, I knew this was going to be a short episode. This episode recap of On Patrol Live, for me, being the Monday morning quarterback, sitting back here watching this show with a glass of wine and just laughing, but trying to fully understand the dynamic, which is what I'm trying to do. And I think, collectively, if myself and Dan Abrams sat down together and had a conversation, we probably would come up with the same thing, that these are the platforms that we need so that there is not the headache of the two people can't come together if they're always talking. And I think the point I'm trying to make, but I'm making it not so well, is that law enforcement is in the right hand, the citizens are in the left hand. We got to come together and put our hands together and fold it, because if we fold it together and come together, there may be peace along the way. I know that America is in a very volatile situation right now, especially with things going on with the National Guard being deployed on American soil. The other law enforcement agency that's just gone way rogue. It's a tough time. It's a tough time. I need us all just to come together collectively. If you don't know what's going on or why this is going on, take the time to read an article. Read an article from a newspaper from that region that you know nothing else about. Read a blog post from somebody all the way over there in Arizona, if you live in New York, to try to understand why they're so passionate about what's going on the border, while the folks in New York are like, okay, we get that, but we got to talk about what's going on with the stop and frisk here in New York. Take the time to read the articles to understand why it's so important. So with that being said, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to find something from Tim and he'll be able to add his 2 cents in later on. But if not, that's okay. These few minutes that I took for you guys to listen to me, I admire you guys just for taking the time and listen to me vent, listen to me go off. I'm still waiting for Dan Abrams to call me and say, we are definitely a go for On Patrol Live West, but we need you to host. My Zoom is ready for you, Dan Abrams. It really is. And I know Tim will be my co-host, and all the questions that I text him about as we watch the shows, we'll be able to talk about it live on the air for On Patrol Live West. We got you, Dan Abrams. We got you. Anyway, guys, I'm going to close off with thank you all so much for listening. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you want to be on the show. God bless you. Thank you. This is Law Enforcement and Me. I am Carmen. Until next time.